Welcome to the CLI-ALPMA Innovation and Legaltech Week 2021 on-demand program. I'm Fiona Croswell and I'm the Learning and Development Manager at ALPMA. Joining me today is Melissa Lyon, Associate Principal at Hive Legal, Amanda Fajerman, Head of Legal Technology at Lawyers on Demand, and Sharon de Bomford, Principal at Results. This session is focusing on collaboration, communication and tech, the next big people thing. With the urgency of firms moving to work from home arrangements due to the pandemic, the use of tech-based communication and collaboration tools has become the norm, and growth in the use of tools such as Teams, Zoom, Slack, and many more has been significant throughout 2020. But in the rush to get all systems working, we can't lose sight that these tools are fundamentally connecting people. In this session, Amanda, Melissa, and Sharon will discuss the communication and people strategies needed to maintain the human element of effective communication in the new world that we find ourselves in, and we'll touch on what we can expect in the future. So, to help set the scene, Melissa and Amanda, can you give us a quick snapshot on what tech we're talking about when we talk about communication and collaboration tools?
Sure, thanks, Fiona. I think what we need to do is to start off and think very broadly about the concepts. And really, when we're talking about these tools and platforms, it's any tool or platform that's going to enable us to connect with each other and also communicate. So that is really quite a broad range and probably not as narrow as some people would think. And when we think about that connection and that communication, there are a number of different organisation or a number of different ways that can happen. It can happen within your team, within your organisation or your firm, with your clients, with your network, and more broadly as well. So we're really talking about any way that we're connecting and communicating. And then when we look at the ways that it's being used, it could be to manage matters, it could be how you're working with your clients, it could be how you build and maintain your culture within your firm or your organisation, it could be how you build your own networks personally as well. And it could also be how you are inspiring and implementing innovation and different ways of thinking within your organisation or your firm. So it really has that very broad way of looking at things, and we shouldn't just, I think, narrowly look at the different tools and platforms that are out there. This is more of a concept from that point of view. Amanda, I know you've got some great examples of those types of platforms and tools.
You know, each category that you've described there is actually reflects exactly what I had in my mind, which is, yes, it is quite broad. Your mind automatically sort of thinks towards the video conferencing tools like Teams and Zoom and WebEx. And yes, that does video conferencing. It allows for group calls, team-based channels, projects and discussions that have, crossed barriers we've previously experienced with people not only working from home, but people in different offices, people across countries, and it's replaced the need to find, okay, where's an available meeting room because I need to meet with X person from this team, and all multidisciplinary teams can now work together through these platforms. So I had sort of marked in one category, it's those sorts of tech that allows for video conferencing and team-based or project-based channels for communication like Slack. And then I had another category, which is a more of the mural or Miro type visual representation of data. So how do teams collaborate and work together visually instead of being face-to-face to generate projects, collaborate on ideas, drive innovation and prioritise ideas and the framework for that. And then I had as a third category tech which has evolved from their traditional server-based tools where you might have had an intranet with your document management or your knowledge management tools towards more cloud-based collaboration tools such as SharePoint or intranet sites, net documents for document management, even online cloud-based CRM tools that now integrate with your finance systems and your end-to-end task management for projects. So there's a whole lot of cloud tools that have really supercharged what was previously possible and the way the teams previously communicated amongst each other.
Great, thank you. There are huge benefits to being able to connect with people wherever you're working, particularly over the last 12 months. But Sharon, Are there some tips that you can give us on how to, what we should be looking out for when communicating to others using tools rather than being face-to-face?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that just goes back to the standard sort of 101 of communication, and it's probably worth just talking about some of the things that might fall into that strategic framework. So depending on what you're trying to communicate, you're going to then choose the appropriate channels. You're going to be targeting your audiences. You're going to have your key messages. You'll think about the way in which you're going to measure the effectiveness of your communication and those sorts of things. And probably, depending on the size of the project that you're doing, you may or may not wrap that up into a communications plan. But those questions sort of should sit at the front of any communication. And then I think you need to provide the information that people actually need. So, for example, if you were rolling out a new communication tool, you would need to provide the information that the users of that tool will need. So that's things like giving them the context about why you're doing it, making sure that the information you give is always honest and transparent. Paint a picture of the future. What is this going to look like? And one of the most important things to do when rolling out these new tools, as opposed to just, your day-to-day communication using them, is to really paint or explain the what's in it for me situation, because if you don't connect that link between personal effort and vision, including role clarity, you'll find there's a degree of disconnect. And one of the ways you can further support that is to anticipate and address concerns proactively using things like FAQs. And then, make sure you build in feedback mechanisms in whatever it is you're doing, because it's really important to measure, respond and be agile in your planning, and report back to the people who are setting the objectives for it.
And Sharon, what tactics would you use to ensure that people are utilising the tools effectively from a comms perspective?
Well, I suppose if you were rolling out rolling out a new form of tech that people hadn't been used to using regularly, which is slightly different to just getting people to use it on a day-to-day basis, that's going to fall back on training and the communication support and rolling out that new tech. But again, it comes back to communicating honestly at all times, even if that includes saying that you don't know something yet. It might be about an additional feature that's planned, or it might be around the time frame that you're using. Communicate your strategy using clear language and engaging themes. And importantly, get the right people communicating quickly, because line managers are always the most trusted. So get them sharing information quickly in the most face-to-face available channel that there is. So ideally in person, but if that's not possible, through one of these video tools like a Zoom or a WebEx. And make it very clear what actions you require. Along the way, you can also ask questions of partners and staff to find out what else they might need to know and adjust your communications to make sure that you're addressing those needs. But always focus on the needs of the audience. And that's going to change depending on their role, and the information that they need will change, because their position of me is going to be different to the next audience.
So Sharon, can you share with us some of the tactics that you would use to enable good communication whilst using tech platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it comes down to the same communication strategies that you'd use with any given channel. But if we think about rolling out a new tech platform, which is probably where you need to give it the most thought to make sure that people are comfortable in using it, it's really about setting that up and informing them with the information they need. So, for example, you'd communicate the strategy using clear language and engaging themes. You'd get the right people to communicate, and pretty quickly as well. So that would be typically line managers who are the most trusted. So you'd ask them to share information in the most face-to-face way available possible in the first instance. And you can do that by supporting them with things like cascades. And they'd have agreed key messages and clear actions that need to be asked. And I think that sort of clarity is very important. And in part of that clarity, you need to think through addressing the implied questions. So what do I need to do? How's that going to affect me? And for each of your audience groups, that will be slightly different. So I think as long as you always focus on the needs of your audience and give them the information they need to be able to use the new platform or to effectively communicate using existing platforms, that's great. And then overlay all of the classic communication techniques like storytelling to share positive news, and make sure that you're using the right channel for the right purpose. So for example, in sharing that information in the first place, it might be a good idea to use something like Zoom or WebEx at a team level. Then you might need to set up a collaboration platform or an intranet with all of the how-to guides, which could be in various media forms, anything from, you know, hard copy guides, PDF guides, or video how-tos. So yeah, it's basically about using all of the tricks that you have in your normal communications toolkit and just applying them to these new channels and to the rollout of these new channels.
We are, I think, moving to a new normal where, you know, people will be working in different ways. I don't think we'll go back to traditional full-time work from office. So I'd be interested to hear, Melissa and Amanda, how you think firms, what firms will need to think about with their workforce and their people to enable communication to continue when there's a dispersed team. You know, some people might be in the office, some might be at home. If you're having team meetings or meetings, how do you remain connected and make sure that communication is happening effectively in our new normal?
Yeah, it's really interesting for us at Hive. We've worked as a dispersed team for many years now, so it's something that we had addressed way before COVID as well, and it was something that we really had to work at, and tech tools played a big part in that. So one of the things that you obviously, what COVID has brought about and what we had to address was, when you've got a dispersed team, you don't have that face-to-face communication. You don't have those random, you know, running into people in the office or having those water cooler conversations and that type of thing. So how do you deal with that? How do you make it so that you are connecting in a way and sharing ideas and also feeling supported in a dispersed environment? I'm happy to say that I think tech does play, or obviously plays, an amazing role in that, but there are a lot of benefits in using the tech as well, from the point of view that you really have to make it a conscious decision about how you connect people and how you come together using those platforms. So video conference is obviously really important, how you're working with your chats across your team using Teams, how often you're coming together, having your cameras on during Zoom meetings or team meetings as well, so that people can see those cues, which you don't have if you've got your cameras off or if you're just doing the phone calls. So it's something that we have put a lot of focus on in the last few years. We use those tech platforms, but we don't just use them for the way that we work. We use them in our innovation and collaboration programs, and we also use them in our social programs as well, or social things that we do in the firm as well. Having fun, using the video platforms, using the quizzes, using all of those different ways of working together can make a really big difference to the culture of the firm and keep you connected and keep you productive and efficient in the way that you're doing your work as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's the question, what has been gained through the use of these tech-based platforms, and also what has been lost, and how do you strike that balance between compensating for the losses and getting the benefits. So I think everyone would agree that sitting in front of a computer on video conferencing is actually far more exhausting than being in the office and having the face-to-face meetings, because you're working so much harder at picking up on all the non-verbal cues, which comprises like 90% of verbal communication, the body language, the tone of voice and everything. So as Mel said, you've got to have your video on, otherwise you're missing all those cues. You've got to be able to mark meetings, let's say at 25-minute increments, to leave yourself a 5-minute buffer to stand up and take that break, which often we just don't do, but you would normally do if you were in a face-to-face environment, getting up, getting a drink, going to the bathroom. And But there are a lot of other benefits. So the automatic transcripting that some of these tools can provide, the automatic Google Translate of languages that can break down some of the language barriers that we might have had, the saving and the recording of the meeting, we're actually getting a far better data record because we're using these platforms. So we always think about, when you're thinking about the tech or the implications of the tech, it's not just the tech, it's the people and the processes that sit behind that. So you can have incredible tech with amazing features that are being underutilized, but what is really important is to say, well, what are the processes that we're going through in our goal of this project, or in our goal for this deal, or at working together as a team. So something like a strategic plan is really important, so that everyone is clear on the purpose of that particular tech, or that particular channel. I'm using Teams as an example, where you've got teams and then channels within teams to say, this is the right audience for this particular communication. This is the purpose. This is how we're going to capture the data, how we're going to record it, how we're going to table actions. All those things are really quite important in the way that the teams are going to collaborate and communicate in the future.
Yeah. Absolutely agree, Amanda. And I think the other thing to think about too is that from these tech platforms are mimicking face-to-face. So they're and I think they're increasingly getting better at it all the time, which is amazing. Additional benefits I see is actually the fact that when you've in a face-to-face situation, be it working in an employment arrangement, or even when you're seeing clients, with tech tools, you're almost leveling the playing field a bit. Sometimes it can be quite intimidating if you're in an office situation, someone behind a desk and you're there. What I think this increase in the use of these collaboration tools, and also video conferencing and that type of thing, is that everyone's on the same playing field. It's not that boss employee, it's not the lawyer client not actually knowing what it's like, or not feeling comfortable within an office environment in a firm. People are in their comfort zones, and I think that human element of people being able to be in a comfort zone and feel that they're on the same level can really increase the impact of the communication as well, and hopefully get better results as well.
I think,
sorry, Sharon.
No, I was just going to say, I think the other thing that's quite nice about it is that you can see in the background, aspects of people's lives. So they are able to bring their more authentic whole self to work. And in doing that, you instinctively kind of increase inclusion and diversity in the thinking, which we know improves a lot of the outcomes. The flip side is that I'm not sure that everybody has got it is exactly a level playing field, because some people just don't have those quiet workspaces. I work with somebody whose home-based office is literally Harry Potter under the stairs. Whereas I'm really lucky. I have an enormous room that I get to work with. So, just the level of distraction around you can also, a bit of a different experience.
Absolutely agree.
So it's a double-sided coin.
It is.
I think it's leveling the playing field, and the ability of people who might otherwise have felt too embarrassed or awkward to voice their opinion or have their voice heard and share their ideas, have been able, through these tools, chat. And it's less formal and it's less structured, and so there's a greater ability for junior members of the team all the way through to senior members of the team to contribute to these sorts of discussions.
Absolutely, and I think one of the things too to think about with these collaboration and communication tools is that it's not necessarily always real time. It can be the gathering of information or the gathering of ideas, for example, through chatbots, which do have that human element to them as well. So, to have the ability where you're asking people for their feedback or for information as well, that you've got that whole mimic of the conversation happening through a chatbot, and people sometimes feel a lot more comfortable doing that than having a face-to-face conversation where they might feel intimidated in giving that information. Comes back to your point too, Amanda, around the collection of the data as well through these platforms, that it becomes usable in a really good way. One of the platforms that you referred to before, Amanda, is Mural, which I use for design thinking sessions. The fact that you can have multi-editors on those platforms working at the same time, real time, people not having to be intimidated to speak up in a forum, they can just write on a virtual post-it and put it there, means that you are really being inclusive, as Sharon mentioned before. But it also means that you've got a graphic depiction ready to go. It is there. It can slot into a document. It can be emailed off to anyone. It can be sent through Teams or Zoom or whatever. It's there. And that efficiency of the gathering of the information and the ideas, I think, is a real benefit of these types of platforms. I think the other thing that comes out of that as well is that you are hearing the voices, as Amanda said, but you're hearing a diversity of skill sets, of seniority, of people from different organisations, all those different types of things. It really does draw together an amazing richness of information from different people. One of the other benefits of the increasing use of these types of platforms is the globalisation that we've seen occurring at a huge rate in the last year or so, where the availability of, to get to conferences, to be communicating across huge networks now from a global point of view, has been made so much easier by these types of platforms as well. And I think that that's a great thing for our industry, to be able to see, obviously, what's happening overseas, but also that idea of bringing in all of those different ideas and thoughts and processes.
Of course, there is that dramatic disadvantage of being based in Australia, where you're dealing with people overseas and have to be looking very professional at 5 o'clock in the morning.
I've mastered that. No, I don't know whether
have you?
I don't know whether I've mastered the looking professional. I have mastered the getting up to watch all of those early morning conferences. It's an amazing wealth of information out there.
Yeah, I think I've got one in a couple of weeks: Berlin, Dublin, Costa Rica, and Australia. So that was a real challenge, but it's okay.
Can't solve the time zone problem.
No. Unfortunately.
The globalization aspect has also meant it's also organizational. So especially, organizations that have offices across the world, there's almost a bit of a standardized. There's now the ability to have a more standardized approach to contracting, or a standardized approach to the way we do business, so that you don't have, Australia with their own document management system and their own templates and things being so different. Although that can happen, you're able to share that information and share that knowledge through these cloud-based tools, and learn from each other a lot more easily than we've ever been able to before.
Let's just focus on some people strategies at the moment. I know, we're all pushed into using technology very, very quickly, and a lot of firms focused on getting the technology up and running, but didn't really focus on what their strategies should be regarding their people and their use of technology. And with any change management process, there's always the resistors that come through. So what kind of strategies can firms start thinking about to bring those resistors along, so that, we will continue to use these tools and benefit from all the things that we've been talking about?
I think one of the things that is important is to understand that in any change management process, there's sort of a bell curve that happens, and you've got, at one end, you've got the people that are early adapters, and at the other, you've got those resistors to change. I think for all organisations, they should sort of focus their efforts on the rump of, say, 90%, somewhere between those two outlying categories. The early adapters will pretty much take care of themselves. And the resistors take a lot of energy. So you do need to accommodate them. And you do that by providing information through a range of other channels, so that they can fall communication areas and styles that they're comfortable with to get the information that they need to use the new channel. You can do that by being proactive about some of their concerns and asking for their feedback. But really, at the end of the day, you need to make a call about the number of those people and the effort applied, because it may be that it becomes more of a HR or management issue rather than just a communication issue.
Yeah. And what do you think the skills that are needed of our people within law firms will change dramatically as a result of using different tools for communication and collaboration. You know, what should we be focusing on upskilling people on, our staff and team members, to make sure that they're using these tools as effectively as they can?
A lot of the tools are so intuitive these days that people really shouldn't feel like they need to upskill too much to be able to do that. And I think that's the way it should be, that these tools should be really looking from a user-focused or user-centered point of view to make it as easy as possible. And a lot of them are making it really easy. I think the other thing in terms of getting people to adopt this way of doing it is to not expect people to, you know, completely absorb themselves into this and become masters overnight, and to really encourage people to things out on their own. So, you know, just jump into a platform, have a go at, no one was watching you, you can't break it, come, you know, have a play. And I think sometimes then, you know, people are a bit more comfortable with doing it, rather than, you know, expecting that, you know, they're going to be masters overnight of what they need to do.
I think that's right. I think you need to give them autonomy in the way that they approach it. And also for a period of time, put in some redundancy options so that they can fall back to other more comfortable ways of communicating, because you don't want to completely disengage them from the organisation, but you do need to take them on that journey. So having a bit of overlap is quite useful. I think from a skill set thing, I think Mel's quite right that the tools should be intuitive and experience should be smooth enough that they can just kind of muddle through it, or fall back on the formal training that you're going to be giving them. But I think what's useful in this whole broader conversation would be to focus on some of the basic communication skills that you might need to overcompensate for, where you've lost a lot of that visual body language cues. So it would be about making sure you pause and test assumptions. It's making sure that people are understanding the information that you're imparting in the way that you're intending, and just actually being a bit more mindful about some of those basic communication skills, so that it doesn't get lost in the speed and efficiencies of the tech. You actually make sure that you are pausing deliberately to communicate effectively and be inclusive.
Melissa, I really wanted to touch on innovation as well. This is, you know, our Innovation and Legal Tech Week, and just thought that you would be really well placed to just give some examples of the best tools and practices to help keep innovation alive when using tech. So I'll hand over to you.
Look, I think, and I'll focus here on really that idea of bringing people together. So, you know, when we're talking about design sessions and that type of thing, obviously there are tools that can be used for the project management of these things after, and Amanda will be a better place to talk about those than me, but, you know, the tools that I use, or the platform that I use most, is Mural. Miro is a similar tool as well. What I've found with Mural is it is that virtual post-it note, whiteboard, real-time ability for people to just play, to throw those ideas, but it also has that beautiful way of doing it in a templated way. So there are templates there for you to use in terms of how you whiteboard it and do your virtual sessions. You can make it your own. People can jump on the board anonymously. You know, they don't have to have their names there if they don't want to. And what I've found with using that tool is that you can also have some fun with it. And, you know, we did a recent session with the Chief Innovation Officers Forum, where we got a whole lot of people together, and we looked at what the future was for us as Chief Innovation Officers, and what our roles would be and that type of thing. And we developed teams, and we had graphics, and we had photos, and we had songs and everything on there that you wouldn't necessarily have if you're just sticking to that text, or even the whiteboarding, real whiteboarding. But it was a lot of fun, and Amanda was there. It brings out that creativity, and it sort of does bring out that human element in us, where we are able to actually, I suppose, let go of the idea that we're sitting in a boardroom or sitting there wanting to put the ideas out. This is a way of really inspiring people to bring those types of ideas out. We've also used it. We use it that way of communicating and collaborating at Hive. We have our we've recently done a whole of firm strategy day where we did the whole thing virtually because we had to, but it worked. It worked really well. We were able to have different breakout rooms, different sessions, collect all the information, and we're off and running to implement some of the new projects that we've got coming ahead. So it is a different way of doing things, but I think there are a lot of benefits of doing collaboration in that way. And one of them, I think, is that it really does give you the benefit of bringing in those multidisciplinary skills and allowing people to bring their ideas and focus into those types of environments.
It's also made it far more accessible because you can have a 1 hour strategy innovation session, inviting everybody from anywhere rather than having the headache of booking a room that suits everybody with a certain enough space for everyone to have a little desk to sit on with pens and paper. So it has made it far more accessible to achieve results. I think that working from home has had a lot of benefits. I think people have been quite pleasantly surprised at both the productivity of the teams, the way teams are working together, and their outputs as well. Notwithstanding that we're not face to face.
Exactly. And on that globalization point too, Amanda, I mean, I've been involved in design sessions where we've had people from all over the world, hundreds of people contributing to these mural boards and the information as well. And it's fantastic to be able to do it that way.
I often think about, the data point that you need for innovation, because through using the tech, through structuring, I'll use an example of like the way people would organize their information. So like a folder structure for documents so that people have trust in the central repository of knowledge, so that they know when they click on the document, it's the right version, the right document to send to. The ability for people to then be able to have online collaboration so that they're editing the same version of the document without having to email files backward and forwards. That has benefits both at a project level, so within the organisation, and also then externally, because you can have multiple collaborators and sharing a Teams portal, for instance, that everyone's not having to email documents backwards and forwards. So you're actually able to be far more agile in your ability to work smarter and more efficiently and actually get results if you've got the systems and the tools in place to achieve that. So like if you do have that logical structure with your folder structure, people know exactly where to go to find the information they need. If you've got the data about or metadata about your documents or your contracts or how they're saved or where they're saved in the cloud, then you know that when you're doing a search, you're going to get the right search results, and it's not relying on any one single person's subjective view on where or how they might have saved it in what format. So there's a number of data, and I think a lot of not only law firms but corporates particularly are becoming quite more attuned to the risk of corporate knowledge lost, and that most of their knowledge is stored in one person's head, and making sure that the tech is now there as a risk strategy to mitigate some of that risk.
Absolutely. And I think that what you're saying too, or one of the points that you've raised, Amanda, is that idea of the leverage, the number of people that you can get involved in these types of things too very easily in those sorts of platforms. One of the ones that I've become aware of recently is something called Ramesh, which is a market survey type platform where you can have up to 1,000 people actually giving you feedback at the same time, and it's AI powered, so it can then look at the information, can group it, it can provide you with data real time in that side of things. I mean, we can even see that now when we're being more relevant, I suppose, with presentations, with polls on Zoom or whatever. What do you want to hear about? Or the percentage of people want to hear about this. I mean, that is an amazingly powerful information to have real time, isn't it? And I don't think that we have really even looked at how we can leverage that in terms of how we might work with our clients, getting feedback, how we might design things for them. There are amazing tools out there that we're not even using yet.
So I think it'd be good just to finish up with just hearing your views on what you think the future will look like. What are the trends we'll be seeing? I think a lot of us, 15, 20 years ago would never have imagined that with the click of a button, we would be connecting with people by video and audio so easily, and that there'd be so much uptake of it. So I want to hear your outlandish 5 to 10 year predictions of what tools we'll be using and what our people will be doing with them in the future. Who wants to go first?
I might go first.
I've got one, and it comes from an article that I can make sure that I have the link to. It was in the Harvard Business Review, but it talked about really thinking outside the box in terms of collaboration. So when we think about connecting people being in all different places and talking virtually like this, how do we connect them physically? So one of the things that they talked about was if you are getting people together and you still want to have things that they have in common at the time, you could have drones deliver the food that they have at the same time, that type of thing, which I think is a cool idea. Or you could have them have the materials that they need, but it's all delivered, so they're getting it at the same time. So you have that real connectedness and shared experience, which I think is a fabulous idea. Other sorts of things that I've heard about too is the idea of having virtual offices, and this article talks about a platform called Sokoko, I think it is, which is basically almost like the kids' video games that you see. It's the office with avatars in the office of people, and you can see that Mel's meeting with Amanda, and you can ask to go into that meeting at the time and knock on the door, and you're admitted, and you can see that other people might be meeting with clients and that type of thing. So you've actually got a visual of what the office is looking like, which I think is a really cool idea. Some people might not like that so much, but there are so many ways that we can look at this and really humanize, I think, the communications and tech platforms that we have and collaboration platforms that we have available to us.
I think what we'll see is an increase in the interconnectivity between all of these channels and the way in which they dovetail into each other, so that the efficiencies just keep improving and improving all of the time. And I'm going to counter that with my very old-fashioned view, which is that the old face-to-face communication will be alive and well and actually a premium offering, and we'll be saving that for the most important stuff, for the big change messages, for the big bits of news, and that will have incredible cut through when we can actually get people together. So I think it will always be there, but I think its importance in the sort of ranking of communication channels will actually elevate.
I think, it's exactly right that the future of where the technology is going to go has to be, people have to be at its center. The team has to be at its center. And I think we'll see the definition of the word team, the composition of the team, who comprises the team, how they meet as a team, how they're onboarded, how they deal with the data and deal with knowledge within the team. All of that is actually going to change as we evolve through this period. So I think everyone will agree that, the video conferencing is here to stay. There'll be this period where there's a bit of a hybrid, where some people are in the office and some people are remote, which actually may in and of itself have a handful of problems, where you've got a meeting room with half the team and the rest are remote. And I think that will be the biggest challenge, to try and get over that hump of, okay, we've got some people maintaining eye contact, not everyone's looking at a screen, we've got some people looking at a whiteboard and other people looking at their laptop. How are we all going to work together as we work through this transition?
Well, I think that's all we've got time for today. So thank you, Melissa, Sharon and Amanda, for contributing to our on-demand program. We hope everyone enjoyed this session, and if you would like to receive updates about the work of CLI and ALPMA, please be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter. Thank you very much.